Is your shop always behind schedule? Are you running a shop of chaos? Is this common to you? Today, in podcast number 12 of Leadership Unscripted, I will go through many different scenarios and some of the advice that I have for you based on my experience on how to get out of some of these issues. Number one, you're understaffed. So if you look at your overtime percentages, your weekly overtime, if you're tracking that, are you running 10, 20% overtime every week? That is a really key metric to look at, especially because you're throwing time out. If you've quoted a job and it's going to take 10 hours and you're running on an overtime, well, it's taking 1.5 times more than what you quoted and you're already losing money, especially if you don't have any buffer. So it's really important that you track overtime, cause of, so if you have overtime, sure, it's great that you can flex people. If you run with a lean workforce, let's say you staff your shop at 20 people and, you're able to accommodate with overtime the work staff of 25, 30 people, and you don't have to pay the benefits and stuff. At some point, those people are going to get overworked. They're not going to be as efficient. So even though they might be working 60 hours for you, you're not going to get 100% efficiency out of those people. So don't fool yourself. I've worked in many different manufacturing facilities, and there are people that really milk overtime. Good example, many companies ago, I used to have a guy, he would work, and the supervisors would always bring it up to me, but this guy would work his 40 hours Monday to Friday, 7 to 3, and he would do just the bare minimum for the 40 hours, and he would work an additional 20 extra hours. So he'd work an extra 10 hours on Saturday, extra 10 hours on Sunday. So he basically, what the supervisors were indicating to me is that he was dragging his work on so that he could have the overtime for the weekend. So it's something really important to track is overtime. And the other issue that happens is, if you're working overtime all the time, then that can throw off what you're forecasting for your labor costs. If you weren't planning on working that extra overtime and you forecasted it, or you didn't forecast it, that can throw off your costs. All right, number 2, your standards are incorrect. So you've quoted a job at 1 part per hour, perhaps, and it's taking you, and you're doing half a part in an hour. So it's taking you 2 hours to do that same part. That's going to have a significant effect on why you're not hitting your schedules and why you're always behind schedule, because your standards, what you're quoting, is not matching generally consistently what you're actually producing on your shop floor. It's really important to, perhaps every month, get together with your leadership team or your various supervisors, or even pull in some of your key senior technical staff, your programmers, your setters, whoever your key people on the shop floor, and go through your the top things that are the top part numbers that are not hitting standards, and see if there's anything you can do to improve that. Getting people together really helps brainstorm really good ideas. And, if you just look at it by yourself, you may not get the best solution. You may not resolve what the real issues are. But sometimes it could just be that you're aggressively quoting. And because you're aggressively quoting, you're just fooling yourself. So, you really got to stick to, quoting on what the reality is in your shop. Number 3, your onboarding of new jobs is inefficient. So you're bringing in a new job. Perhaps you've got a process where you get engineering and manufacturing together. Maybe you're perhaps if it's a CNC shop, you're getting your tooling guy together to go over what are the things that are going to be required to onboard this job. And some of the issues that typically happen, you don't have, when that job hits the shop floor for production, hits the CNC machine, hits whatever, if you're consistently not having the tooling ready, you're not having the fixturing ready, the programs ready, perhaps the drawings or any inspection documentation or assembly diagrams ready, that's going to impact the equipment that you're using. So if you're using a CNC machine and your scheduler had planned for that to be a 2-day development, and it ends up being a 2-week, and you consistently do this kind of stuff, well, then your planner or your master scheduler can never get an understanding of how long it truly takes you to onboard stuff. So it's really important that your onboarding process is efficient. Look at the key things that are causing your onboarding to be inefficient and pick one thing and say, okay, we're going to focus on this one thing for the next month. If it's tooling, we're going to focus and say, okay, when that job hits the shop floor, we're going to assess, was the tooling ready? If it wasn't, what were the root causes? The second time another job hits the shop floor, was the tooling ready? No, what was the root cause? So if there was 5 new jobs in the month and 3 of those jobs, the tooling wasn't ready, what were the root causes on those? And try to make some improvements on those particular things. Sometimes, a lot of the time, it's communication. Especially with tooling, if this job's scheduled to be on the machine, on this particular date, but the actual lead time of those tools is 2 months, not 2 weeks, and the communication doesn't get to the scheduler, well, then the machine's opened up for that particular job. Yet if the scheduler would have known that it was going to take 2 months, they wouldn't have scheduled that, and then you wouldn't have this machine sitting waiting. So it's really important to assess the onboarding of new jobs. Number 4, you're not fixing root causes of quality issues. So if you're doing some sort of root cause corrective action in your facility, excellent. If you're not, perhaps you're a small shop, just look on YouTube, and there's so many different methodologies, 8D forms, and there's so many different methodologies on doing root cause corrective action. But it's really important to drive down what are the quality issues that you're having you're realizing on your shop floor, and are you actually driving to deal with the root cause, not just some contributing factor or something that's unrelated, but you're actually focusing on the root causes, correcting those, because each time you fix a true root cause, it will help you long term. And not only that, if you focus on not only the root cause, but if there's a systemic thing that's happening that you can fix, an issue with one of your systems, one of your processes that affects everything that goes through that process, if you can improve that process, that's going to not only fix that individual quality issue, but it's going to affect other quality issues perhaps that are going to come in the future. So it's really important to look at and improve the quality of your root causes and your corrective actions so that they're solid, so that they truly fix things. Number 5, you're not clearly identifying responsibilities and accountabilities. So you're behind schedule, and you've got supervisors that aren't held accountable. So therefore they see, your off-shift supervisor sees that, there's an issue on a machine, and, the technical expert on his or her shift lets him know, and he says, well, we'll leave it for day shift, even though they probably have the capability to deal with it. So if that's a significant issue that happens quite often, is people are not held accountable to the responsibilities of what their job function is. if they're a supervisor and their job function isn't clearly laid out, their accountabilities, and they're not held to those accountabilities, well, then you're just throwing money out the door, because you put someone in that position, you paid them money specifically to keep your manufacturing operation moving on that particular shift or in that particular department, and they're not doing a great job of it. You either it's yourself who's not holding them accountable, or you are and they're just consistently failing. And even though you've tried to coach and support them, you find that they're just not even trying. They're not really interested in it, and maybe it's not the right position for them. So you may need to look at exiting them out of that position, because one person managing 30 people has a significant effect. As you know yourself, if you're a leader of any department, the employees are only as good as their leader. So you look at sports, that coach basically has a big impact on that team and motivating that team. So it's really important, you have solid accountabilities, responsibilities, and you're holding people accountable to them. Number 6, you're not measuring performance. So you're not measuring efficiency, quality, schedule attainment, all those different, those are 3 key metrics. So efficiency being that you've got a standard, a quoted standard or a rate, and you're consistently missing that rate, missing that standard, and you're significantly off. So focusing on tracking the efficiency of how well the labor or the employee is doing to the standard. The second thing is quality. So if you're running a long order of parts and you submit a first off, is that first off being measured properly? Do you have a good first pass yield? In other words, when you submit parts to start running full production on a certain part number, are you capable, or are you always delaying getting the job started? Another thing is schedule attainment. So even looking at, say, okay, work with your master scheduler or your scheduling department and say, okay, what do I, on a Friday, get together with them and say, okay, for the next week, what parts do I have to work on? Okay, I have to work on these 10 parts, and they have to be completed next week. Okay, so now this is your plan. And then the next Friday or the Monday, however you want to do it, at the end of the week, look to see, did you hit that schedule? I hit 8 of those 10 parts. So you had 80% schedule attainment. Start tracking your schedule attainment, and not to like put pressure on anybody, but to see where the flaws are in your system. The intent of targets and goals is to see, to keep everybody running according to the quoted standards, quality ratings, but also to see where there's gaps. So when you're tracking stuff, then you can start seeing where the gaps are and where you can improve.